Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd here again. I've got a special guest for you today. This guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. He's the fifth largest owner of mobile home parks in the country. He has over 250 parks in 25 states, decades of experience. Just a great guest here today. Lucky to have him. Please help me welcome Frank Rolfe. Frank, thanks for being on here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, Frank, I think a lot of people who are listening today probably know who you are, but maybe if you could give us a quick introduction of your background and then how you got into the space and how you've taken it from there.
Okay. Well, I got into mobile home parks accidentally, as most people do. So I went to Stanford University, got a degree in economics, got out of here early, was going to write a business school application, had to start a business. That's what you did back in those days, back in the late 70s, early 80s. Started a billboard company, never went to business school, rode that thing for 14 years, sold it to a public company, and then was trying to come up with a new idea, something new to focus on. I built 2 billboards on a mobile home park called Glen Haven in Dallas. So I had familiarity from that perspective. I'd done some favors for the owner in the past, mainly knocking on the door of the manager to see why he wouldn't answer the phone. And I also knew from supply and demand of economics that I never saw MH zoning in Dallas, so therefore I knew that was special. So called the guy up, and he in one phone call sold it to me, saying he would take $10,000 down on a $400,000 purchase, and he'd carry $390,000 for 30 years. And that's what launched me into the industry.
That's great. I did get a chance to see Glen Haven on one of your tours there with your Mobile Home University Club, and that was great. And I know from hearing you talk about on your podcast in the past, that deal had a lot of hair on it. And
it was a very hairy deal, and even to this day, it definitely you've seen it. It still has quite a bit of hair on it. Yes,
it was definitely very dense, and I think the trash trucks can't even get through.
Kind of the Chewbacca of hairy deals. Yes.
Yeah. So that's one thing I'd like to share with people is any tips or wisdom you can give as far as the school hard knocks or lessons you've learned. That one, I know you learned a lot of lessons. Is that park a good example to share some tips with, or maybe another one that you can?
I think that's a good example, and I would hearken back to the book. If you have not read it, it's available by Sam Zell, called Am I Being Too Subtle? And basically, success or failure often is about having a realistic expectation on risk and reward. So Glen Haven, I didn't know what I was doing. It had phenomenal amounts of risk, which was inherent in it, which I didn't know. It had master metered gas and master metered electric and a horrible client base and a difficult location. And it was flowing $2,000 a month negative when I bought it. But I lucked out in that case because in the end, the profit potential was there, even though I didn't even know what it was when I bought it. But over and over again, on all these turnaround deals we've done, the overriding thing is you have to be able to pick your battles wisely. You want to pick things that, for the amount of risk and effort you do in the turnaround, you have to make a huge amount of money. That's Zell's formula. So if you have high risk, low reward, you should never do it. If you have high risk and high reward, then you might do it. And of course, if you have a low risk and high reward, you always do it. So Glen Haven, fortunately, lucked out, but it could have been a horrible story had it not had the profit potential.
Yeah, and I remember that one in particular. I think there's still master meter electric to this day, which is obviously
there is master meter electric to this day. Although I did get the master metered gas solution solved before the next guy bought it. I put in propane tanks, so I dropped it to only one of 2 master metered utilities.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you switch the utilities over to a better system, you're doing value add, and that's when you get paid. Is when you do
correct.
Add value.
That is exactly correct. Yep.
And I read Sam's book based on your recommendation, and one of my favorite things in that book is that he says, every day you don't sell an asset for a price somebody will pay you for it, you bought it.
That's exactly correct.
I've sold like 5 of my parks in the last 2.5 years based on that. We're like, I like the business. I'm bullish on the business. I have some parks I want to buy and hold, but there were some of those I'm like, it's worth more to the other guy than it is to me. So I made a decision to let him go. And some of those were able to
do the same thing.
Retain.
Absolutely correct.
I know you sold a lot of your portfolio as well, but you got a lot left. What does your day-to-day look like at this point? I know you do a lot of windshield time driving your parks.
Yeah, my day-to-day is odd. Yeah, I float around a lot. So what I do is I'm very old school. So every night before the next day, I take a legal pad, I title it with the date of tomorrow. I then put on, the first category says trips, and the second category says calls. I put down everything I need to do that day and every call I need to make that day. And then to get really old school on you, I take a highlighter and I highlight the essential must do without fail items in both categories. And that sets about my day. Once I've completed the yellow highlighted, I move to the next one down. constantly multitasking. Often I'm on the phone while I'm doing the other items on it. And then at the end of the day, I evaluate what I got done and I do it all over again for the next day. I know people listening, particularly millennial people, will say, my God, that's antiquated and stupid. But that's the only way I know how to do it, because I was traditionally trained on day timers before the internet existed. So I can't get over that habit.
That's great. I do this. I do a similar thing, and my whole team does. And you've probably read the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. And it's similar. It's kind of, I think, Lee Ivy and it wasn't Rockefeller. It was Charles Schwab, the one that worked for Rockefeller.
Right.
He kind of came up with, I think, that system or similar system. And I think time management is crucial, and especially when you got a bunch of balls in the air, like I know you do. So
Yeah.
that makes sense. What is at this point? What would you say is the best part of your job? I know you've got operations, but you also have I think the number one podcast, the number one university for this industry. So you're obviously an educator, like to
Yep.
public speaking. Is that your favorite piece, or you like doing operations?
No, actually, the best part of owning mobile home parks, particularly turnaround deals, is when you visit them after they're fixed. And at that moment when they suddenly, gush forward pride of ownership, which it's not always the end of the movie, but you buy a real troubled property and you establish law and order and you start doing big physical improvements. And then at some point in the movie, you notice the residents are cleaning up their stuff, painting their home, putting in carports, and you know that you've won. It's kind of like in those war movies, right? That there's the extreme moment of battle where you blow up the German emplacement, and even though there's still some snipers and things around, you know that you've effectively won. That's the best moment. I was in one of our properties recently out in Decatur, Illinois, one of the worst turnarounds we've ever done, and I was shocked to see someone come out of a home wearing a blue button-down shirt, khaki pants, and Sperry topsiders. And I was trying to figure my brain, man, I've won this battle because I've got the LL Bean catalog coming out of lot number 14. And so that made me feel good, because then I knew I'd made money, because clearly the property is a whole different value perspective when I've got the LL Bean guy coming out of the home as opposed to the person who's, on heroin or something.
Yeah, and Decatur, I'm from Quincy, Illinois. We used to play football against Decatur, and that was the year I was in high school. Was the year there was this big national fight between, I think it was a black family and a white family during the game, and it was a huge national spectacle, and it was a big deal. So Decatur got a bad reputation. So when you're going there, you're taking some arrows.
Decatur always makes these lists of America's most declining cities, right?
Yeah.
And I don't really know why that is, because I go there and it doesn't look any more declining than any other American city. But it's a testament to the need for affordable housing, right? Because we've sold a ton of homes in there, brought in a ton of people in there. But on the surface, every other business in America would look at Decatur at a 5,000 foot elevation and say, oh my gosh, it had its heyday in 1960 or something.
Right.
But it's still doing good for mobile home parks.
Yeah, good. Tell me again if you can share maybe details of that. Maybe not the Decatur deal, but one of them where you kind of talk a little bit about Glenhaven. I mean, how do you tackle a deal when you go in? And I know I also want to cover kind of your dials in the cockpit. I know you've spoken about those before. That are key to operations. Is key to the business, obviously.
Well, Glenhaven, the pivotal moment on that was when I got it from a negative to a break even on cash flow. And that deal, I probably have talked about it too much and done too much. So let me give you a modern one. Okay. So a newer one. All right. The park that we just sold in Austin called North Lamar. It's interesting because I can give the numbers on it, because all other properties, when we sell them, we don't give out the numbers because of property tax. But in that case, they were so stupid that they published in the Austin Statesman the price, which makes no sense because Texas is one of the highest property tax states in the United States. We bought that deal, which was so horribly mismanaged, for a little over $2 million. We bought it back in about 2015-ish, I believe, 15, 16, somewhere in there. And it was an absolute disaster. The mom and pop had no business sense, no pride of ownership skills, nothing. So basically everyone was living in there in the most deplorable conditions. And the city of Austin didn't do anyone any favor allowing it to exist like it did. So we went in and we took away, tons of roll-off dumpsters of debris. We redid the roads, changed the signage, the whole deal, then started raising rents. And we got a lot of flack for it. We were in the media there constantly for raising rents, but the problem was when we bought it, it was at $390, all bills paid, and the market in Austin is about $650, no bills paid.
Wow.
So over a progression of years, we got the rent up to about $580, not including water sewer, and then sold it to the residents for $6.2 million, I believe.
Wow.
And again, it's just your typical trailer park turnaround story. Now that one had a bigger ending because that one, the rents could be pushed more than normal. You're talking, by the time that park is done, the rents will have effectively doubled. But on top of that,
what kind of cap rate did that sell on?
it sold it at a ridiculous cap rate, one that can't be calculated using any form of American mathematical calculator. It's if you get a telescope out, and you might be able to see the cap rate somewhere in the stars. The problem was that Austin is considered a hot market. When you have hot markets, people sometimes get carried away with the heat. But that one also had the additional attribute. It was a political issue because Austin was trying to portray themselves as the person who loves all people, rich and poor. And they found it to be very important that the residents could buy the property from us. So it was actually purchased by the residents as what's called an ROC, or resident owned community transaction. And Austin threw in, I think, $2 million grant to make the deal happen on top of that. So it's very odd. It shows the new sensibility about affordable housing, I guess, but also the fact that in today's American political world, if you are on the right side of some mega trend, crazy stuff happens.
And did the city throw in the grant as essentially equity? Because I assume you had to get a non-recourse loan with that diverse buyer group, and you needed.
Yeah, actually, no, it's a recourse loan. The way it works is, these ROC deals are fascinating. What you have is you have a series of nonprofits like the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and these people will co-sign notes at full recourse if they feel you aren't going to default on it. So they're the backbone of these transactions. There's not a lot done. There's about one done every month in the U.S. Okay. And the residents have to organize, they have to elect officers, they have to vote to buy it, but they don't really buy it because they don't actually have any money, and they don't put any money into it. The money that's put into it is done by nonprofits who are trying to, make everything possible for them. So they're very strange transactions, and we've done 3 of those to date, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they do take a long time. Contrary to what people think, they're very complicated. It's not as easy as it would appear.
I think it seems like it'd be complicated. I mean, you're always kind of running your own little city when you have a mobile home park, but in this case, you're like running a city and you hand it over to the populace to vote their own mayor.
Well, what's interesting is a guy called me recently. He was trying to buy a property, or he had it under contract to buy in a state that has a first right of refusal. And lo and behold, ROC wants to do a ROC deal on it. And the way those deals work, and I told the guy, don't worry, it probably won't work. And I was exactly correct, because most of the time the residents vote not to buy the property. So they organize them, they elect officers, they have a popular vote. And I don't understand it, but in many of these transactions, right off the bat, they die because the residents vote they don't want to buy it. And I think they vote they don't want to buy it because I think they don't actually understand what it even means. But that happens a lot. We've had many failed attempts as well. And often it comes down to just the residents have no interest in actually buying it.
Really? It's interesting. I guess it makes sense. It's
no, it really doesn't. It doesn't actually make sense.
I mean, it doesn't make sense they won't buy it, but it makes sense that they can't figure it out because it's, you've got a team full of advisors and lawyers and experience and financiers that.
Correct. I think it frightens them that they don't understand the ramifications of it.
Right. Well, Frank, can you dive in a little bit on operational efficiency? I know that you got such a big team. I've been to your headquarters in Colorado and seen kind of the enterprise you've got in different lanes, but really, for the small owner, the owner that has 2, 3, 5 parks, you can't afford to have a whole team. So you got to watch the operations, watch the money yourself. What tips can you have? And you've got kind of your key points that you've touched on before, but for the audience here, if you could highlight those, that'd be great.
Yeah. First thing I would point out to people is whether you have 1 park, which is how I started and Dave started, or 5, which we both had, and then up now to 200, it's the same process with a few layer changes. So our most important person is the community manager. We call them the CM, people on the field. But then we group every handful of CMs, typically 5 CMs, sometimes 10 CMs, under another level of management called the district manager. And the district manager's job is just to hire train, supervise, and or fire those community managers, because at some point it would outstrip your own ability as the owner to do that.
Right.
Then if you're big enough, you have collections of district managers that fall under what we call regional vice presidents or RVPs. But it all is the same as when we started on our very first park with that CM. It's just a question of who manages the CM. That's the only thing that really changes. And when we're managing these things, there's basically five gauges on our dashboard. Just like your car has gauges on it, your car probably shows how much gas you have, speed, RPM. The park business, you can also distill down to basically 5 gauges. The big gauge, of course, is collections, because the residents, we're in the affordable housing space, so they don't have a lot of money. So you have to collect the money from them, sometimes without them being very happy about that concept. So collections is key. Another one that's key is water sewer, which people would not realize. That's our single largest cost item. In fact, we have a weekly conference call with our water sewer team. We actually have a water sewer team, and we're constantly looking for leaks, meter malfunctions, all kinds of stuff like that. So that, because that's our biggest line item. There's more money at stake in water sewer than almost all our other expenses combined. Another one is our occupancy, because we're constantly trying to fill. We like to buy broken parks and fix them, so we're always trying to fill them up.
Right.
The next one is property condition. That's just making sure the property looks its best, because that gives me a better chance of selling or renting homes, retaining customers, keeping the city happy, making the bank happy, making the appraiser happy, making a future buyer happy. And then finally, what we call BAD, or budget actual difference. That's a monthly exercise where we look at the budget, how we performed, what we did better, what we did worse, not worrying about the ones we did better on, just the ones we did worse on. Why are we worse? Trying to figure out what happened. Sometimes we're worse because we did good. For example, if I fill a bunch of lots, my water sewer cost or other costs may go up because I got more people, right? And I will initially think, I got a leak. Well, no, wait, nope, I brought people in, right? So sometimes it's that, but then sometimes it's the simple fact we're not doing as good as we could on selling homes, renting homes, or whatever the case may be. And then you figure out your plan, like, what am I going to do to change this? It's one thing to acknowledge it, but what am I going to do to actually physically make this change? And then you try and make the change.
Makes sense. I've listened to that before, and I think my favorite of those is that BAD. And one of the challenges I feel like I've had with it is when you're in the middle of a major turnaround, it's like, man, I'm bleeding money. Like, because I've already put in the next 5 concrete pads. I've already hired the install guy, and I don't have the houses sold yet. So, it's a kind of an enlightening exercise that you look at it and you're like, okay, now I know, like in that example, kind of like your water issue, like the money's supposed to be going out at the moment. It's an investment. The money's gonna be coming back in when I get the house on there, when I get the house rented or sold. Do you modify? I know you have some parks that have already kind of become stabilized, or do you modify how you look at all that based on the business plan, if you will? I mean, if you've got a major turnaround, you're probably not going to be cash flowing in the short run.
Well, you have to. In other words, I wouldn't buy a property that can't pay its own way, unless it's an extreme deal where we're buying it for a penny on the dollar as a complete disaster, and then trying to bring it back to life. But if we're not trying to, hit it with electrical paddles to make its heart start again, we're trying to buy it at a reasonable cap rate. Now, the cap rate may be predicated on our first rent increase or some other assumption. So, I mean, we've bought properties. Look at the one in Austin is a perfect example. No one would have bought that park. We bought that park at I want to say a 4 cap or something.
Wow.
So it's totally predicated on getting the rents up. And so oftentimes we'll look at that kind of stuff. But, the one thing I see people do that you don't want to get in the mindset of doing, that's buying something where you have to do all the stuff just to get it back to what you paid for it. So we pass on those deals all the time. So some guy comes to us and says, yeah, here's my deal. I'm $100 under market and give me a 4 cap. And you say, well, if I raise around 100, I'm only at a 6 cap or a 7 cap. Why the heck would I even do it? Then a lot of times the seller wants you to give them the value for what they didn't do yet. And that it kind of irks them. I mean, I don't even know why a property owner would tell you, yeah, I'm $200 under market. That doesn't mean anything to me. Raise your rent. Don't tell me about it.
I literally had it. I was on site an hour ago in a park and scrambled back home here the guy just told me that. He goes, yeah, I'm 150 below market. I'm like, okay. He goes, yeah, so this is going to be worth, and he threw out some big number. You're worth 14 million when you're done. And I want 3 million now. And I'm just like, how'd you come up with the valuation? I'm just trying to understand your method. And if I'm getting 2 and you're at 3, it's kind of a big delta. He said, well, there's a lot of upside. Like, yeah, that's my upside if I can carry out a successful business plan and sign a note and all this other
Yep.
stuff. It's not going to
Yep.
appraise. It's not going to bank.
Yep.
But
Yeah. And
that
always
is
back to Sam Zell's formula, right? I mean, if you're going to take risk in life, you got to have reward for the risk. And if you want to do really low risk deals like ELS does these days, where they're buying stuff that's completely stabilized on the coast, probably their biggest risk is a weather event, but they only pay out like a 3% dividend. So they buy on very, very narrow spreads. And you might say, well, how do they make any money with that? Well, I don't actually know myself, other than the fact that the American investor, stock investor, is not sometimes the brightest light bulb. And so I don't know why. I mean, I can't understand Tesla and many things in life. But other than those kinds of buyers, yeah, you have to make money with your stuff. You can't buy stuff and break even and then dream of it going up just to get back to what you paid.
right. And I think the REITs, I always feel like they're in a different ball game because they have such a different cost of capital. That their investors are, satisfied getting a 3% return. We're like, I can't raise capital and give somebody a 3 pref, let alone even 3% all in. Just doesn't really make
Well,
sense.
to do a 3 is kind of odd because see, if you're going to do a 3, they can buy it at a 3 cap, and then they can finance some of this stuff now at a 2 point something. So they would be, if in all cash, they could do a 3, and then they have a slight bit of leverage. So they might even get a little more than that, but you can't make any big money with that. That's again, that then goes back to me to a whole risk reward. Those are huge enterprises, as I'm sure you're aware. Running mobile home parks is not a glamour business. It's not
Right.
something that people will do for free.
Right.
So, I don't know why I guess I don't understand why they allow themselves to do it at those kind of low margins. And I mean, again, they've done famously well. Stocks have done extremely well here. One of the best runs of any of the REITs over the last couple of years now. So I can't say anything wrong. They're all great operators, but it kind of seems like they should probably set some benchmark, maybe a little higher than where they're at. Just a little. I mean, just try and get a 5% cash on cash or something would be.
I don't get it. They must be smarter than me. I just don't know how yet because they're doing
We
something.
will all find out in the end.
Yes, exactly. And Frank, one more topic before I let you go. What is your opinion on the current market? I mean, I'm seeing what I feel like pricing is getting crazy in a lot of circumstances, but I've only been doing this for 6 or 7 years. You've been around a lot longer. You've seen ebbs and flows in the recessions.
Yep.
What are your macroeconomic views on the price?
Here are my views. All right, I get the same question. First off, I've seen true cap rate compression with my own eyes. I saw it from the period of about 2004 right up to the 2007 collapse, and then the Great Recession. And when you have true cap rate compression, the cap rates fall below the interest rates. And that's when I knew with my early portfolio it was time to sell because cap rates were at 4, but loans were at 5 and 6. Who buys that,
Yeah.
right? It's like a no-brainer. It's absolutely crazy. I was doing deals. I sold one property where the appraisal didn't make, so the guy put in the money to the differential between the appraisal and the purchase price. Any logical buyer would have walked that deal, right, and said, "Wait, the appraisal is this much under. I can't do it." But that was the go-go year. So I've seen go-go. We're not in go-go right now because there's still some restrictors on the engine, and that's the lending community. So, the days of go-go lending haven't returned in that manner for our industry, but yet you are going to see lower cap rates on the high-end institutional stuff. And that's simply because you have so many institutional buyers chasing the 100 plus, or more specifically, the 200 plus communities, that they're driving those prices up through simple supply and demand. So I see the industry's got several personalities now, right? It's become like a multi-personality person here. So you at the high end, on the high end properties, you've got this institutional group, and so that's one kind of pricing structure. They're buying at low cap rates, but not compression cap rates. Then when you ditch that aside, then the normal market is kind of like it used to be. It's about 3-point spread stuff. I look at deals for people all the time doing park evaluations, and people are still bringing me deals that are often even 10 caps and 12 caps. But if you look at where they're sourced from cold calling and direct mail and that type of stuff, right? So the brokers are all about money, and they've kind of gravitated into the institutional space because that's where the money is, right? So it's like your new starting out Marcus and Millichap broker. He's doing the, you know, the 30 and 50 lot stuff, but all of the big time guys, they all want to do the big time stuff.
Sure.
So if if you're just starting out and you talk to the brokers, they will lecture you that, oh no, your expectations are terrible. Cap rates today are, 5.2 or whatever the heck it is. Well, yes and no. Yeah, if you're an institutional buyer trying to spend 100 million of capital, but not for the normal person. So, I've seen the same cycle before even. This is the same cycle that we saw back during the cap rate compression days, that often the stuff that the brokers have is priced completely separately from the rest. But, you see the same thing in lot rents. I'm sure you see that on your properties. I mean, in many market where I'm in, the REITs, and I mean the actual REITs, right. UMH normally, their rents are $100 a month more than ours, right across the street. So it's almost like we're in two completely different industries. We have nothing in common. They pay their managers probably twice what we do. It's just odd. So yes, the industry is always morphing, changing, but the biggest morph changes in what most people getting into it are not looking for, and that's that high-end institutional stuff.
Right. No, makes sense. Great points, Frank. I appreciate it. Well, once again, thanks for having you on. How can people get a hold of you? I mean, you're pretty much everywhere. How would you best like people to find you?
If you just go to MHU.com, I'm all over the darn thing. That's been my hobby now for 10, 15 years. My partner, Dave's son, Brandon, runs it all, does a great job with it. That's always the best. I mean, I'm constantly putting new articles and videos and stuff on there, normally from out in the field, because it entertains me. So if you go to MHU.com, you can't not find me.
That's right. And I'm a MHU boot camp graduate. You think you're going to be back live anytime in the near future? Or are you still
that's up to the United States government, because the answer is we can't do it until there is a no mask mandate. We learned it the hard way. We tried to do a live event. And then the week before the live event, we were told that the area we were going to hold it was back on a shutdown. So we're never doing that again. Because we then had to we had to walk and pay all of the hotel and all of the other costs. So no, we're not doing it again until Dr. Fossey and everybody else says you can throw your mask in the trash. We're fine. So when that will happen, it's anybody's guess. I know probably no time soon, but yeah, we love to meet and see people because that's what we've always done historically. But until then, I'm getting a lot of feedback, honestly, for people who like the virtual better than the live event, mainly because of travel cost. Yeah. And they also like having all the recordings of it. So we'll have to let the people tell us what they want to do when the masks are off. Because by then people may be just so comfortable with the idea of online, right? Online is taking over the world, basically.
It really is. All right, Frank, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.